Sitting up straight.
Sitting up straight, fixing hair.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jenny Nash, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar. I'm really excited for this conversation. So while everybody comes in and gets situated into the chat room, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some housekeeping things. We'd love to have you tell us who you are, your name, and where you're from, and what you're working on, where you are in your writing process. If you're at the start or the middle of a book, if you're writing middle grade, like my guest today, or YA or something else completely, I'd love to hear that. So come on in and tell us that you're here, and we will get started. So I'll do a soft introduction of Mae. Hi, Mae. Mae has two little kids who are having breakfast in the other room with grandma, which I love.
They're out of the house. They're out. So I make sure, like, you need to take them out to breakfast, please.
The glamorous life of a writer. I love that, though. So people are coming in. That's great. And please feel free to say hi to us. So I will now do the official introduction. I'm Jenny Nash. I am a book coach and an author, and I'm the Chief Creative Officer and founder of Author Accelerator, which is an online program that offers book coaching at an affordable price to writers so you can write your best book. And we do webinars from time to time just for education for our members and for the public at large, and they're some of the most fun that I have. So we're excited to be here today to talk to Mae. And Mae Respicio I've known Mae a really long time, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Mae worked at the UCLA Writers Program where I was an instructor. I guess I still am an instructor. Mae has moved away from Los Angeles and left that position. But for many years, we worked together on many different classes and workshops and projects and initiatives. And she had a whole alter ego as somebody behind the scenes of writing, and it's really exciting that she's stepping out now into her life as a writer, which has been building for a really long time. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a wonderful conversation to talk about that. So the basics of Mae's situation is that she's just sold her first book, which is middle grade, to Wendy Lamb at Random House Books. And we're going to talk about her writing process, her road to publication, what she's doing between now and her pub date. So we have a ton of things to talk about, and feel free while we're chatting to put questions into the chat box. I always try to get to everything, and then at the end we'll have an open time for Q&A. Okay, so great. I see Susan is here, who's writing YA. Hi, Susan, and thank you for your cute comment on my blog post this morning. And hi, Elizabeth and Shelly from New Jersey, and Mary from Washington, who's working on future ideas for middle grade and YA, and Lori, who just finished a middle grade novel, Melody from Kansas. Awesome. It's great to have you guys here. Thanks for checking in with us. So Mae, let's talk about, well, it might be sort of fun to talk for just a little while about your work at UCLA. You worked there for 10 years for the Writers Program. Yeah, so what did you do there? And more importantly, after that part, what was it like to be behind the scenes when you wanted to be a writer yourself?
So I was at the UCLA Extension Writers Program for a long time as a program representative. So I was basically part of their core team where we designed classes and curriculum and hired writers. It's a wonderful program for anybody who's looking for a place to learn more about the craft of fiction writing. So yeah, behind the scenes, we did events, readings, book festivals. And for me, it was just the most amazing experience just in the people that I met, like Jenny. And I just made friends with so many accomplished writers. And it was just such an inspiring place to see that happen and to meet all these people. And, you know, we were also obviously meeting students all day long. And it was just a very inspiring place to hear about people and their writing goals and what they're accomplishing. So yeah, it was, it's been a few years now since I've worked there, but definitely I still have all those, that network, this huge network of writers that I met. So it was an amazing place for me to work professionally for a long time.
Well, and what people may not know who don't live in Los Angeles is that the UCLA Writers Program is actually, it's massive. I mean, Mae's job was a big job. It's not a little writers program. It's the biggest, isn't it the biggest adult education writers program
in the world?
Yeah.
And there was such a huge part of the literary community in Los Angeles, very ingrained in that world. Yeah, so it was a really special place to work for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, and so she had a big, big job. So when she talks about events, I mean, we're talking about events with, you know, 1,200 students, like big, massive undertaking. So that was your work for a while. And so while you were doing that work, though, you were starting a family and also doing your own writing. In the early 2000s, you won, how do you like that? The early 2000s, you won a PEN Emerging Writers, Emerging Voices Award, which is a very prestigious award. Do you want to talk about that award and why you applied, what you applied with, and what that meant to you to win that?
Yeah, so actually this is a good time to talk about it because I think, and I'm not sure, but you should Google it. It's called the PEN Emerging Voices Fellowship, and I think they're actually in their application process right now. So you may not be too late if it's something that you're interested in checking out. But it was, so it was almost a year-long fellowship that I did with 4 or 5 other writers, and it was really what I considered sort of the start of me feeling like, oh, I can be a writer. And it was the most intense, you know, whatever it was, 9 months that I had of it was kind of 2 pieces. They had the craft piece. So we were workshopping every single day. We had professional mentor or published mentors. We were taking classes. We were doing readings, you know, at all these different book festivals. And then there was an aspect where it was just fun. We got to schmooze at literary parties and, you know, meet all these authors, and we were being introduced to agents. So it was this whole just diving head into the literary world. And it was just the most incredible opportunity. I'm so grateful to the foundation that they gave me as a writer. And it was really the first time that I thought, oh gosh, you know, look at all these people doing what I want to do. Like I think I can do this. So it was, yeah, so if you Google them, I think they're in their application process right now, and it's almost up. So, you know, it's a wonderful start. You do have to be in Los Angeles, but they have had a lot of people who've won the fellowship and then who maybe moved to LA for a year. So if you're not local to Southern California, you should still check it out.
Yeah, it is. It's an amazing program. So you were in that program and you're working on a novel that you abandoned. Is that the correct term?
Shortly after, well, so during the fellowship, I was writing a women's contemporary fiction. I don't even know what the genre is now. It was like a book for women, like a literary novel. And shortly after the fellowship was done, I actually finished that book, or I thought it was finished. And I went out to agents, you know, some of the agents that we met during the fellowship, and just kind of cold queried. And I got some great interest, but they all sort of came back with the same response, which was, this book isn't ready yet, you know, come back to me when it's finished. You know, the writing's pretty good, but you know, here are these holes. So, and I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. And I got all this feedback and it felt very overwhelming. Like, okay, so maybe this book's not done, and how am I going to fix this? And then I had kids, and I just know, and that book is literally, you know, hard copy in a desk drawer, and I've yet to finish that particular book. So that was the first full novel that I wrote. But I look at it now, and yeah, it wasn't ready yet. I had, you know, whatever it was, 75,000 words, but it wasn't ready to be sent out in the world. And I know that now, after going through this experience of selling the middle grade book. You always hear, you know, you need to make sure that it's ready. It's your one shot. when you're looking for agents. And yeah, that was true.
So then you have two little boys, so that happened, and you started this family. Did you continue to write when you had babies and little teeny tiny kids? I mean, they're still pretty small, right? How old are they?
Small, so they're 6 and 8. So yeah, they're still very young, and they're very boy-like, and they're very physical, and they you know. And I work a full-time job too. I still work as a university administrator, but at a different school now. So it was challenging. So I did still write when I was pregnant and then when I had kids, but I was doing nonfiction writing, and I was publishing for different like Pregnancy Magazine and Working Mother and all these sort of motherhood related type publications. So I was doing that, but that was manageable because it's different to write, obviously, a 600 word article under deadline than it is to write 60,000 words. So I knew that I still needed to kind of keep my head in things, but it was a very different kind of writing. And as far as fiction, I just wasn't doing any fiction writing anymore. I kind of didn't want to. That's not where my head was at. I was sleep deprived. I couldn't figure out how to balance work and having a family, and it's still a huge challenge for me right now. So it wasn't really until a couple of years ago that I thought, oh gosh, I want to be writing fiction. How do I do that? So I just took a couple of classes to get my head back into what it meant to write fiction, including I took your class. Yeah. And I was writing here and there, but it wasn't really until recently that I thought, okay, if I don't write a book now, I'm never going to write it. And so that's been kind of a recent thing for me, is going back to fiction, as opposed to, I was doing personal essay, nonfiction, that kind of thing.
So yeah, my favorite thing that I have seen that you wrote is that little piece you did for Patagonia, with that amazing picture. I love that.
Yeah, I took that picture too, and it was such a candid moment on my iPhone, and it was this. I wrote this little piece for Patagonia about my boys and them wearing Patagonia jackets when we go out to the beach in the mornings. And there's this great picture of them like jumping off of rocks, and it looks like they're flying in the air.
That's really good.
Yeah. That was like, whatever, 150 words. So that, for me as a mom who also works full time, is a manageable piece of writing.
So let's talk a little bit more about this, because I know we have some people on this call who are already saying, how on earth do you do this? You have a full-time job, you have a husband, you have 2 little kids.
Yes.
You're writing fiction on your own. So can you talk about the nuts and bolts of that? Like, when did you actually write, and how did you carve out the time?
So I'm still figuring that out. And really, that's been, writing is hard, but I think for me, what's been hardest is trying to figure out when to write with kids in the house. And, we all have our obligations and commitments, not just families, but day jobs or whatever you have on your plate. And so you need to show up and do the work. And so for me, it's meant trying to figure out how to build a writing practice, meaning for me, how to write daily. And so with this middle grade book, I actually wrote it literally on a few minutes a day. And most of those minutes would be like at midnight, when the boys were asleep. When I would rather have been watching, catching up on Walking Dead, I was trying to write this middle grade novel, like 10 minutes here, 10 minutes before picking up my kids from school. It was sort of piecemeal. And I think if I had had the time to just write straight through, I would have written the book a lot sooner. But probably took me about a year to have what I thought was sort of a very rough beginning, middle, and end, writing it that way, just 10, 15 minutes a day. And then several months after that of revising. But I've just been, I've kind of taken the steps of just a little bit at a time. So you always hear, okay, if you write 1 page a day, that's 365 pages, which is very true. So I wasn't giving myself a word count or a page count. I was just going by a few minutes of showing up each day. And whatever that meant for me, a few minutes, again, might be in the middle of the night. It might be like while my kids are brushing their teeth. But what I found is, even 2 minutes could be an idea. 2 minutes could be a new sentence. 2 minutes could be, could lead into 2 hours if I had time late at night when everybody was sleeping. But I found that if I just did a tiny bit each day, then my head stayed in it, and I had a continuum. And then I was always thinking about the book, even if I wasn't always sitting down at the computer and writing it. So it's, yeah, it's been a long time coming. It's interesting because it took me the busiest time in my life as a mom to young kids and working full time to realize, like, I have to do this every day. I can't just write when I'm inspired. So I think, you know, way back when I did the Emerging Voices Fellowship, I was kind of one of those writers where I thought, oh, I'm just gonna write when I feel like I'm gonna write, you know, when I feel inspired. I didn't have kids at the time, and that's when I had the time to write, and I wasn't doing it every day. And now that I'm super busy, I am doing my best to carve out a little time each day.
So I think it's worth noting, though, this is a great, really specific example of how writing gets done. I mean, you're talking about 2 minutes while your kids brush their teeth.
Mm-hmm.
But you were not writing totally blind, because I know, blind meaning like, I'm just going to write and see what happens. Because I know when you did the course with me, you were really working on, okay, what is this story? What is the structure? Whose voice is it told in? Like, you had that stuff nailed, and you worked very intentionally at the beginning to know what you were doing. Is that, and you also did the I call it a retreat, but that's not what, right? The, was it Hedgebrook?
Yeah, I'm doing Hedgebrook actually in August, where I'm going to have 2 weeks away. This is the longest time I've ever been away from my family to just write. And so I'm amazed that I was given that opportunity. So that's coming up. I haven't done that yet.
Oh, I thought you already did it.
No, it's coming. I'm hugely looking forward to it. Yeah, 2 weeks away on some island in, you know, Washington, in my own cottage, where I get to just work on my second book. So I'm excited for that. But sorry, so your question, oh, so I was in your, I forget what the class was called, but it was an awesome class.
It's the book startup, or the blueprint for a book. I've changed the name, but that beginning, getting those beginnings right.
Yeah, no, that was hugely helpful to me. So I'm somewhere between a plotter and a pantser. I normally start off with kind of a general outline, but I allow myself to be flexible on that outline as I discover who my characters are and what's at stake and what they want and all those things that you're trying to figure out in your story. So your class was wonderful because it really helped me hone in on all those things before I started writing. Because the thing is, if you are writing on, you know, literally 5 minutes a day, the thing that I always have in mind is, okay, I'm about to have my 5 minutes. What is my goal for that next 5 minutes? And that's my like own sort of personal writing process, is because my time is often short. I need to go into that writing time with a specific goal in mind. And that's really worked for me. It's held me accountable. It's made me use up that short writing time as best as I can. And so with your blueprint class, it really helped me to hone in on what my story was before I just started writing pages. And that way I didn't waste any time. And I knew what I was doing going into it.
So this might be a good time to talk a little bit about the story. It's the coolest story, and maybe could you just give us a little synopsis and also where the idea came from?
Sure. So it's about a 12-year-old girl. Her name is Lou, and she tries to build a tiny house. I don't know if you watch any HGTV. A tiny house is one of those very tiny 100 square foot houses. So it's a 12-year-old girl who tries to build a tiny house in order to escape her very crowded home and all the sort of problems that she has in her own home life. Because what 12-year-old doesn't want his or her own house? And the girl, she's a 12-year-old Filipina American girl. She's got this very sort of loud, cultural, intrusive Filipino family. And it's a sort of coming of age, contemporary book. What I'm hoping will be a very heartfelt, sort of soul-filled novel where she's discovering herself and how she fits into the world. And she's discovering a lot of first, friendships and first loves and all those things that I love about middle grade. I'm hoping will all go into the book.
Now, you told me before that you wrestled a bit with the middle grade versus YA designation, and a lot of people writing in this range wrestle with that. Can you talk about your decision to make your main character 12 and your decision to go middle grade?
Sure. So I definitely, the book had a huge middle grade YA identity crisis when I was writing it. And I actually started off as writing it as a YA novel. And for me, that had allowed me to kind of go deeper into some of what I thought were sort of more serious types of issues. Like she had a mom who was going through depression and was a little bit of a hoarder, and all these sort of dark things. But it was interesting because as I wrote it, the voice felt so young to me, even though I was writing it as like a 17-year-old girl as a YA. The voice just felt, it felt young. And I thought, well, what would happen if I tried to not make her 17, if I put her into a 12 or 13-year-old girl, and then maybe give, or just to write it younger. And so I did that. I took a few chapters and kind of middle MG-fied them. and it worked. And I did more of that. I sort of just played around. I thought, oh, this for whatever reason, it just felt better to me as a middle grade novel. So I took out a little bit of the darkness and I made her 12 instead of, 17. And then I just continued on as a middle grade. And it was interesting because when we sold the book, and Wendy and I had a long conversation with her notes about what I would be revising. And she said, oh, there's these traces where the voice feels very adult. That's a holdover from when it was YA. So part of my revision has been to go through it and kind of make sure that it feels middle grade in tone and in voice.
So we're getting a little sound. Are you going like we?
Okay, I have no idea what you just said because it's a little wobbly on my Google Hangout. Okay, I think now you're back.
It got really weird there for a minute. I think we're okay. I don't know what that was. There's so many things to talk about here. So that YA middle grade decision, you shared with me that after you sold the book, meaning now, you're still working with that. What you're saying is going back into it and working with that to refine and revise around that idea. So I'd love to hear more about that, but also in the context of, so you sold this book, and we'll get to that part in a minute, how you got your agent and that's the sales process. Once you sold it though, were you surprised by the fact that you still had more work to do?
No, I didn't. So the offer was a preempt offer. I had the lovely opportunity to actually speak with Wendy Lamb, and I was terrified by that call because I was so intimidated. I'm thrilled to work with her. I mean, she is my dream editor, and she has published so many amazing books and authors that I admire. She published When You Reach Me a couple years ago, which won the Newbery, and so we had this wonderful conversation where we kind of talked about the book and its issues, and we decided that I still had work to do. I did think it was finished, but we're taking it in a little bit different of a direction than I had originally written the book, namely to focus on the kids, more than kind of the adult issues that happen that kids deal with. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah, I accepted the offer knowing that, okay, I'm still going to do a big revision on it. Like I'm cutting out a couple of characters that I originally had and filling in some holes that were there. So the work is not done. And I'm in the revision process right now.
So I think it's really important for us to say the book. So right now it's July 2016, and the book is coming out in spring 2018, which
like a long time.
Yeah, don't realize what a long time it is. And this is part of the reason why is there's often work to do. The editor, works with you after the sale. So are you finding the revision process working under the tutelage of a fantastic editor? How does that compare to your writing process where you were grabbing 2 minutes or 5 minutes at a time? Are you able to do the same thing with revision, or is it a different kind of rhythm?
It's a little bit of the same, but now that I actually have this deal and a specific goal of, you know, finishing this book, I've been able to carve out a little bit more time. I mean, I'm doing Hedgebrook coming up, so I'll really have a good couple of weeks where I don't have anything else on my plate other than writing. And, you know, my husband's been great because he will take the boys out and give me time on the weekends. And so I think now that I've got this very specific thing that I'm working toward, I am putting in as much effort as I can, but still a lot of it is still in the middle of the night. Yeah, working with Wendy is incredible. I mean, I couldn't ask for a more sort of thrilling experience. And, you know, I come from a workshop sort of background where I workshop and I've had these great teachers and mentors in my writing life, and she certainly is becoming one of those people. So it's fun, and it's still a little bit unbelievable that I'm getting to go through this process, but yeah.
That's so exciting. So let's just talk then a little bit about when did you decide, or what did you use as your criteria to decide when you were going to start pitching to agents? Like, how did you say, okay, I'm done, I'm ready? What led you to that decision?
Right. Well, so that was the big thing is and you hear this advice all the time, is you just want to make sure that your book is ready before you submit to agents, because you really just have that one shot. And, you know, I saw this working at the writers program. We would often offer classes on writing the query or, you know, pitch classes. And yeah, it's super important as well to have a strong query. But what I would say is that you can have the strongest query in the world and hook an agent into reading more pages. But if your pages and your book is not ready, then it doesn't matter how strong your query was, because then it's like, oh, your book's not ready, next. So I wrote the book, and I spent a long time revising it. It was probably, I don't know, a year and like 4 months before I actually started thinking like, oh, I think this might be ready to submit to agents. I had a few very trusted readers throughout the process, and I did them at different stages in the process. I had, and these were all writer friends who I trust and who give very constructive critiques. So, and they know my writing pretty well. So I had somebody at the very beginning when I had a very like super rough draft. So that was kind of, I had a beta reader then before I did the next draft. I had somebody read it right before it went out to agents to kind of help me confirm like, okay, this is ready. And then I also had a reader so my agent and I, who's another amazing person, and still pinching myself that I work with her, Sarah Davis of Greenhouse Literary Agency. So Sarah and I actually did a revision as well. She's a very editorial, hands-on agent. And I had a beta reader when I did my revision with Sarah before we actually went on submission with the book. So, you know, between that, you know, trying to take a few writing classes again to get my head back into it, I did whatever I could to make sure that it was ready before I actually submitted to agents. And when I thought, okay, this is actually, you know, I have some good stuff here, and I don't think I can do any more of this on my own, that's when I thought, okay, and let me just put it out there and see what happens.
So you sent it to 10 agents, and did you send it to them all at one time, the 10 at one time?
No, I did 2 batches of 5. I sent it out on like a Monday and then on a Tuesday. But I spent a bunch of time kind of culling my list of agents. You know, there's so many ways now through social media to find out what agents are looking for and what their submission guidelines are. And so always make sure that you're really following those guidelines. And, you know, there's the hashtag MSWL, hashtag manuscript wish list. So I really spent a lot of time trying to find out what agents I thought might want my kind of book. So, you know, I looked at what books they sold. You know, I joined, what is it, Publishers Marketplace to kind of look at stats, you know, things like that. I Googled all these agents to find out if they were mentioned in interviews by authors or by their clients. So I really honed in on this list. I wasn't just kind of blanketing. And every single query, all the 10 queries were very personalized. So it was like my dream list. Like, these are the 10 people I would love to work with. And so I sent it out, and then I got response back the next day from people requesting the full. And then it was really just a few days after I sent out my queries that I had gotten the first offer. And then I ended up getting offers from a few agents. So that was a really interesting process also to talk to agents on the phone and find out how the relationship works. And it was also very nerve-wracking and overwhelming because I thought, oh gosh, this is such a huge decision to figure out who I'm going to work with. I felt like this is something I've been working on for so long, this dream of writing a book, that it felt like a huge decision of this person's going to influence my writing life. So how do I make that choice? But I mean, everyone I spoke with, they were all such lovely people who knew what they were doing, and I thought I could get along well with any of these agents. And then so I ended up just sort of going with my gut, and I think it was the right choice.
So can you talk more about the research process? This is a process that I frequently help writers through as well, and people are often surprised how much time it takes, the agent research process. So you talked about using social media. I just want to get some specifics on that so people can hear how it works. Did you go follow the agents on Twitter that you were circling around? Is that the first thing you did?
That was one of the things. And so, Twitter newbie here, I was not a social media person at all, but I've been learning how to use Twitter. I'm hoping that's a place where I'll be kind of marketing the book a little bit more and interacting with librarians and teachers and those kinds of people. But yeah, so I created a Twitter account. I followed agents. I looked at their websites. I Googled, top middle grade agents, and all these lists come up. And then I just started by looking at each individual agent. Like, I made a list of names. Of course I didn't know who any of these people were. And I just started Google stalking all of them, trying to find, again, if they were mentioned by clients in interviews. And, a lot of authors will talk about when they or how they sign with their agent. So you can find a lot of opinions about who agents are. And then again, I just tried to hone in on who was looking for what. I knew I had these themes of family and friendship and a tiny house, and I just tried to find agents who were looking for what I had written. And that's what I started with. And then I was easily able to kind of cut through people on the list, like, oh no, this person's only looking for sci-fi, this person's only looking for such and such. But I found the people who are looking for, kind of heartfelt middle grade novels. And that's what I started with. And then it was interesting because, so you feel like you kind of get to know these people as you're Google stalking them, because you're reading about them and you're hearing opinions about them. And I don't know if this person would, seem like a personal fit. So I would like cross somebody off the list. And of course I didn't know these people personally. I was just kind of making these gut reactions. But yeah, so then I came up with this 10 dream agents. But I did spend a lot of time doing that before I actually sent my query out.
So your book features a Filipina girl and has a lot to do with the Filipino culture. Was that something that you thought about when you were looking for agents, or did you look for people who were specifically looking for maybe a ethnic protagonist, or was that not part of your calculation?
I certainly think that was part of it. I mean, there's a huge discussion now going on in publishing about we need diverse books, and it's true. I mean, there's just not a lot of representation of other voices on contemporary mainstream bookshelves, and that's always been a goal of mine as a writer. I mean, I several years ago wrote a book with Arcadia Publishing called Images of America, Filipinos in Los Angeles, which was sort of a compendium of photos of the Filipino culture, kind of showing their stories of everyday life and of immigration. And so yes, cultural stories have always been an important part of me and what I write, and it's sort of the filter that I write through. It's one of the ways that I see the world as a Filipino American person. So that was important to me, that whoever I was working with understood that, of this is a book that showcases a voice that you don't see a lot on bookshelves, and I wanted someone to really connect with that as well. So yeah, that was definitely an important piece to me, was trying to find someone who would embrace having a new voice out there.
And did you speak to that in your query letter?
Oh gosh, I should have pulled up my query letter. I think I did. I did, like, yeah, this is a girl, about a 12-year-old Filipino American girl, and she's, you know, blah blah blah. So I think I did. Yeah, I did mention it in my query letter.
So interesting. Okay, so you made your agent decision, and you picked Sarah. And how long did you work with her before you guys went out to publishers?
We worked together for, it was a few months of, and, you know, largely on my end. So she did the same thing. She gave me her own editorial letter of her thoughts, you know, and we talked a lot about the book and what we thought it still needed, before we thought it would be ready to go on submission. So, you know, we'd had conversations and a lot of back and forth, and she gave me her own editorial letter. And then it was just me working on the revision for a good month or two, like a couple of months, and then, you know, sent it back to her, and then we thought, okay, it's ready. So really, yeah, there was a lot of time spent in making sure, even before it went out on submission, that we both felt it was the strongest book it could be. Because even when you're at that stage and you have an agent, you're still competing with so many wonderful books, right? I mean, it's not like you have an agent and it's suddenly a golden ticket. That really doesn't mean anything. It just means that you have one other door open, but once that door is open, there's still so much competition. So we really tried to make it as strong as we possibly could, or as strong as I possibly could, before we officially, you know, she officially sent it out into the world.
So I just want to reiterate for people listening, you had beta readers and editorial rounds and revisions before you even went to the agent, a lot.
And classes of you know, throughout the years of learning how to write fiction, of the fiction writing.
And then you got the agent, and you had months of revisions with the agent, and then you got the editor at the publishing house, and you're having months of revisions with the editor. I mean, so the message here, just for those people listening, it's, you have to be prepared for a very long process of like the idea of done, like until the book goes into production. It's you've still got rounds with the copy editor, you've got rounds with the proofreader. Like, you have to be prepared to do a lot of work all the time. And is that, do you find yourself lacking energy for it ever, or is it still fun?
No, it's still fun. You know, I've been wanting to do this for so long that it's just such a cool thing to say, oh, I've got an agent, or I've got an editor, and I'm working on this book. So it, you know, it's fun in the sense that, gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. I mean, it's not so fun when I'm trying to figure out a story problem and I'm like knee deep in my pages, like, how am I going to fix this thing? But no, it's still, I feel very lucky. So it's still very much a fun process. But yeah, I mean, it's a ton of work. And I guess I kind of knew that, you know, I do have a lot of published writer friends. So I've been able to sort of hear about their experiences, you know, people, and it's such a range, like people can be on submission for months and months, and not even sell the book, or people can, you know, kind of knock heads with their editors in the revision process. Like, I've heard the gamut of stories, but I think I'm learning, yeah, it's a lot of work, but it is fun work if it's something that you've been wanting for a long time. It's, yeah, it's cool.
The revision that you're doing right now is really interesting. Let's talk about that for a minute, because you told me earlier that you're taking a whole character out of the book. At this stage, in this part of the process, you're removing an entire character. So do you want to talk about why you made that decision and what that process is like?
Yeah, I made the decision because it just made sense for the story, and I you know, every cut or slash that I'm making, it's because I'm hoping that it makes the story stronger and one that will resonate better with 12-year-old or 13-year-old readers. So, I mean, I don't really know what my process is because I'm still sort of discovering that. So I basically, you know, went through the book from start to finish and went through every single scene. You know, lots of, I work very visually, so I do lots of Post-its and kind of mark things in red. And, you know, my work table at home's got papers all kind of spread out. So yeah, it's basically just going through the book from start to finish, scene by scene by scene, and rewriting each scene. And that's been my process.
Mary asked a really interesting question. She said, do you ever feel that the story is no longer your own because there's been so many requests for revision?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mary. I don't think so, because every revision has been a thought process. Like, I don't say, I wouldn't have taken on this offer had I felt like those revisions didn't make the story what I still wanted it to be. So what's interesting is that, like, the intention, you know, what I want, the kind of story that I wanted, it's still there. It's just tweaking, you know, the storyline. And I mean, it's been wonderful to work with someone like Wendy, because we kind of get into these, you know, great conversations about story and about the choices that my characters are making. So it's not like I'm just, oh, I'm going to revise it for the sake of revising it. I'm revising it because I feel like the revisions work for what I want the book to be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, and I think a good way to also talk about this is that when you're at the process of, excuse me, selecting an agent and also selecting an editor, you heard Mae say that she had the opportunity to be on the phone and understand the way that they work. And at that point, what you're really doing is trying to make sure that the person's vision for your book is the same as yours. And I work with a lot of writers at this stage, and you do sometimes get into situations where that's not true, where the agent has a vision and they're describing what they see or how they think it's going to be, and the writer's thinking that's not the book that I want to write, and they have to then make the decision, do they want to go with that agent or that editor or not? And you can imagine that it's a hard decision, right? If you've gotten an agent and then they have a different vision for the book, or, you know, you've gotten an agent wanting an offer. So maybe you could talk about when you were talking with the agents and editors, you said you were going with your gut, but that's what you were listening for, right?
No, exactly. And it was, you can actually Google like what questions to ask agents, and lots of lists come up, but definitely that is one of the things that you are talking about is your book. Well, you know, so what changes do you what do you think about the book? What resonated with you? What didn't you like? What change do you think it still needs changes? You know, how do you work? Are you an editorial agent? Like all these questions, which when you're making a big decision like that, you should definitely feel free to ask the agent, because it helps you understand how they might help guide you through the process. Especially if there's an agent who is willing to work with you on a more editorial level of making the book stronger before it goes out on submission. So I definitely, I asked all those questions to try and get a sense of what they thought of the work itself, and whether, and you know, I kind of sort of this literary contemporary writing is kind of what I enjoy doing, and I wanted to get a sense too from the agent that they would be with me on that for a full career. So yeah, you're really trying to find out what they think of your work and how, because you know, then ultimately they're the ones pitching your work, right? So you want to know that they're pitching your vision in what you wrote.
Right. So Susan makes a beautiful comment. She says it sounds like trust and chemistry play a big part in the process. And what would you say about that, Mae?
Oh, definitely. You know, when I had all these agent offers, I was like, oh gosh, I thought this should be such a happy occasion, but it felt so agonizing to make this decision, because it just felt like such a big decision. But yeah, so I think on some level you do have to kind of go with your gut and chemistry, because you want someone that you don't feel intimidated by. You want someone that you can work as a colleague, someone that you can speak honestly with and be very candid with, because it's your book and it's your career, and you want that sort of, I think you want someone that you enjoy working with, right? So far everybody that I've been worked with, they've all been such lovely people. I think, oh gosh, I'm so lucky. These are people I enjoy working with and learning from. I mean, that was another big thing for me too, was at least picking, or both with Wendy and with Sarah, I thought, oh, these are, you know, seasoned industry people who I could learn so much from. And that was such a big, you know, I come from an educational background, someone who offers classes, and I'm a huge believer in lifelong learning. that I thought, oh, these are people who will help me grow as a writer, not just sell my book, but working with this agent, she'll help me become a better writer out of this process. So yeah, chemistry, a little bit of chemistry, a little bit of it's I don't know. I don't know if there's any magic pathway, but yeah, you do have to go with your gut a little bit.
So we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to ask a few questions about, so your book is, I'm trying to do the math, it's like 2 years out, a little less than 2 years out. Are you, I mean, I know the answer, but I'm asking it for Are you doing any work on marketing or connecting with your audience at this point? I mean, as we said before, you've got a job, you've got a family, you've got revisions on the book to do. Are you also thinking about marketing?
I'm starting to. I mean, because my head is so wrapped around trying to revise the novel that I haven't had much thinking time when it comes to marketing. But I've started doing little things here and there, trying to learn how social media works, and already starting to kind of try to build whatever relationships you can on, on Twitter or that kind of thing. I joined this wonderful social sort of media group called the Electric 18s, which I found that the world of kidlit, of YA and middle grade authors, is it's such a supportive, wonderful community. And so there are these groups every year. So the Electric 18 are people coming out with books in 2018, and we will be marketing each other's work through, book giveaways and cover reveals and interviews, and really just being supportive of each other's work to get our names and our books out there. And there's so much of that online that you can find, and it's fun too, because then you suddenly meet these other authors and you find yourself in this sort of other literary community of people doing the same thing that you are, which is important too as a writer. Is you want to try and find people to kind of commiserate with and find support from. So I'm doing a little bit of that. But my husband is helping me with my website, which is not up yet, but it'll be maerespicio.com, maerespicio.com. It's not up yet, but that will be soon. And yeah, and really going to a lot of the groups that I've worked with, Penn, when I did their fellowship, they've got a huge audience, so I'm hoping that they'll give me a shout out once the book is out, and I am trying to find ways of getting the book out there. But yeah, I'm still a little bit wrapped up right now in the revision, but I have a little bit of time to figure it out.
So some of the ideas I know you're thinking about, just so people see how this works, is Mae's book has elements about the Filipino community. It deals with the building of a tiny house, which is a whole movement and the whole thing. And these are some of the ways that she can be connecting with potential readers, is through those communities. And can you talk just a little bit about the reality of middle grade, that they're kind of gatekeepers to middle grade readers, are not necessarily the people who are out buying books or on social media around the book themes. So what, how's your thinking around that?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm learning, obviously the audiences for middle grade versus YA is very different. I mean, oftentimes in YA, if you're on Twitter, you're responding directly to your readers because YA readers are on Twitter. But for middle grade fiction, kids that young aren't really, they're not on social media. So I think a big marketing strategy will be to start building relationships with librarians and teachers and the people who are actually getting books into the hands of these kids. And I've started talking to my local librarian about ideas of how to kind of get the word out there through libraries or through education, or we're thinking like, oh, maybe we could get on an HGTV, or I think you have to look at your book and figure out what the themes are. And I mean, there's lots of avenues now to get the word out there. So I think
a group of middle school kids to build a tiny house.
Yeah. Cool. Done. My main character will tell you that. So, but my family and I, we visited the very first, or supposedly the first tiny house, which is out somewhere in Sonoma, California, just sitting in a yard somewhere. And so I spent a lot of time talking to those people about what this book is and how we could get it into the hands of people who are interested in building and construction and tiny houses, because that's a huge movement too, of people building these tiny homes. So, look at the unique aspects of your book and try to see what audiences will come of that, I think is an interesting way of doing marketing also.
I mean, that's just genius. And just to amplify that to people, so Mae talked about talking to her local librarian. So she's 2 years before her book comes out. She's talking face to face with her local librarian. She went to the first tiny house and talked face to face with the people there about that house and about her book. It's boots on the ground, really trying to understand her book's place in the world, her audience, the themes. I mean, that's the way it's done. People are often looking for like some magic thing, marketing thing, but that's the way it's done. And I just think it's so, you're like the model writer, Mae. Like, doing that while you're doing your revisions and have these kids and the family. I mean, it's extraordinary. And
a lot of people think, oh gosh, Random House, like, wow, you hit the big time, and like they're gonna do it all for you. But it's not true. I don't know any writer, traditionally published or self-published or whatever, who doesn't do their own work when it comes to getting their book out there. I mean, it's really what you have to do. And you think about all the competition, you walk into your favorite local independent bookstore and you see the selections on the shelves and you think, how do people even make choices? So yeah, you really have to boots to the ground, like you said, out there really pushing your stuff, because there's a lot out there competing against your own book. And yeah, the work, if you sell at a Random House, the work is not done. You still have to do a lot of that on your own.
So true. So Mae, let's see if anybody's listening has any specific questions for you. I've put up your website, which is coming soon. This is Mae's Twitter. You can follow her on Twitter and learn about the book as it's progressing, and also watch what she's doing on there and learn how she's doing it. I'm sure if you connect with her on Twitter and say you heard her today, that she'll say hi. And
my Twitter is lonely. I don't have very many followers yet, so I have to figure that piece out too. I don't know. Yeah, a lot to figure out.
No, it's what you do. You just jump in. That's what you do. So does anybody on the call have any particular questions for Mae about what we talked about? We covered so much ground. It was so great. And I don't know, I was having this feeling, Mae, while I was talking to you, that this interview is so great and it covers all this wonderful material. And I have this feeling like, I think your book is going to do really well. I think it's going to be really a big deal.
I hope so. Let's hope.
It's going to be so fun to look back on this interview and hear these things, because once a book comes out, the discussion becomes something very different, right? The discussions then about the story and the themes and all this nuts and bolts behind the scenes stuff gets a little bit forgotten. But so people are saying they already followed you. So you guys don't have any questions? Come on, about your own books or your own process or beta readers or anything. We have a few minutes. We'd love to answer. But or Mae, is there something I didn't ask that you think I missed?
Gosh, I don't know. I think we covered a lot, right? Yeah. So just take classes with Jenny. Work on your writing. Ready before you send it out to agents, and just keep working on your writing. Do a little bit each day. If you have kids, it's fine. It's doable. It might take a long time, but I'm here to tell you that it's very doable. Yeah, a little bit each day.
So there are some questions coming in. Lori's saying she's an architect and she loves your tiny house idea, and I think she connected with you on Twitter, so maybe there's something with architects that could happen. Susan says, Mae, I just want to say that I'm inspired. I had an age identity crisis with my YA book too, and eliminated a character, so she relates, and your story has her fired up, and she says thank you.
I'm glad, Susan.
Audra would like to know how you found your beta readers, and I actually had a question about that as well. Were they middle grade readers or adult?
So one of them was a middle grade writer herself, and then the other two are, you know, writer friends who I've known for a long time who they've published work too, but I think more in the adult works. So for me, you know, I've been lucky because I have a lot of wonderful author relationships, especially working at the UCLA Extension Writers Program. So I was able to pull from longtime writer friends. But there are places like, so if you're not familiar with the SCBWI yet, and you're writing middle grade or YA, you should be. They are the most amazing organization, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and you have to become a member, but it's such a wonderful resource, and that's a place where you can meet other writers doing what you're doing and make connections with people to become beta readers. You know, I think you want to start meeting other writers too, if you don't know many, and the way to do that are through classes and conferences at your library, and those are the places where you'll meet other writers doing the same thing who can, you know, you can swap pages, you can join a writing group. A lot of times you can just Google like your hometown and writing group and see what comes up. So I think, yeah, trying to meet other writers, going through the process, that's probably going to be your best bet for beta readers. So because like beta readers and critique groups, it's a little like dating. You want to find the best match. Like I've been in writing groups where I'm like, oh, these are nice people, but I don't find the comments resonate with me or are what I need for my writing. So sometimes it's a little trial and error and working with people. You know, maybe you'll exchange a chapter with somebody else and see if you are compatible that way as critique partners. But yeah, doing your best to just find out where writers hang out in your hometown and reaching out to some of those people.
Good advice. There's some more great questions coming in. So Frances is saying that she is writing a novel that began about a little child and it's turning more into being about the adults. And she says, how can she work her way back to focusing on the child? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's kind of what I did with mine. Is I ended up having to just take the adults off of the page, literally, and to just focus more in on the child and the child's reaction to what was happening in her world. Because when you throw adults into a kid novel, then yeah, a lot of adult issues come up. So I think if you focus on your protagonist or the kids in your book and how they're reacting and feeling to what's going on around them, then hopefully you're honing in a little bit more on the child aspect of the story than on what's happening in the grown-up world.
Right. No, that's good. Hopefully that helps. Mary is asking, did you always know you wanted to go traditional, or did you ever contemplate self-publishing?
I always wanted to go traditional, and that was just for me. I mean, I have a ton of friends who've done both, but I think me coming from working at a place like the Writers Program at UCLA and knowing so many traditionally published friends, that was always sort of my goal. And I also, I started kind of learning fiction, you know, the craft of fiction writing during a time when social media and self-publishing wasn't hugely prevalent yet. So that was just always my goal, was to try and get it traditionally published. You know, that world didn't seem so unattainable because I was working with authors who were doing that, and these were people in my everyday life. So I thought, oh, look, my friend, you know, these people can do it, maybe I can too. So who knows what would have happened if I didn't find an agent or if I didn't sell the book. But for me personally, that was always my goal.
So Shelley says that she's been, hi Shelley, that she's been using her own middle grade students, she teaches music, as beta readers. And she says, Mae, do you think I should use adults too? I've been thinking the kids would be the best critics and tell her if it's boring or confusing.
Oh, that's a great question. Gosh, you know, for me, I haven't used kids as beta readers. I feel like if you're still working on the story and the kind of crafting the story, that probably adult readers or adult writers are going to be your best bet initially. I don't know. Do you have an opinion on that, Jenny?
I think both is really smart, and there's different times, different times when they're appropriate. I think it's really smart to have a couple. They're the kids who are going to be reading it, and you want to make sure, like you say, that it's authentic and resonates with them, for sure. I think that the thing about it is that the kid beta readers are going to not be very good at helping you identify what's not working or fix it. They to articulate what's happening in a story or what they liked, like they'll be able to give you broad strokes and what they liked or didn't like, but to be able to articulate, like in Mae's case, there's too much of the mom in chapter 3. Like that's going to take an adult reader, I think. Not to underestimate the intelligence or intuitive powers of a 12-year-old. They're massive, but in terms of being able to help you make the improvements, I think you would want the adult. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
That helps.
Funny story. My 8-year-old was he said, "Oh, mommy, what's your book about?" So I was trying to explain it to him, and he just looked at me and said, "Maybe you should write a Goosebumps instead."
Yeah. Okay, so a couple questions. I'm trying to figure out, because we don't have a lot of time. I got to go fast. Okay, so Lori is saying that she writes for both women and also children, and does she keep those identities separate on social media? I have some thoughts about that. Do you want to answer that, Mae?
I'll let you take that one on.
Okay. Lori, the answer is it's always best to try to find an umbrella that can contain everything you do. There's a lot of writers that do a lot of different things. They might write nonfiction and fiction. They might write memoir and fiction, or they might have some totally different thing, like they're a yoga teacher and they write fiction. But to try to find there's a word for it. It's called it's a new word to me, so I have a hard time remembering. It's called the what is it called? It's like this, what's the psychology of the people that you would be speaking to? So this is completely made up, but maybe your adult books and your child books both share something about introverts, or both share a theme about creativity, or whatever it might be. You want to find the thing that connects them so that you can just be your authentic self out there in the world, and that everything you do is unified. It doesn't have to be the same. It's just that there's a thematic unity, if you will. That's a really fast answer to that question, which we could talk about for a long time. I'm going to put a name up here. My friend Dan Blank at We Grow Media has a great mastermind program that is about connecting with readers, and he does a lot of work with people around those kinds of ideas, like finding your umbrella. And then there's a question from Francis about she has a hard time bringing challenges and drama into the lives of her characters because I want a perfect world for them, yet I know that's not a reality. Do you have anything to say about that, Mae?
Well, you don't want a perfect world for your characters. Otherwise, they don't have any challenges to go through and learn from and grow through. And you don't have any tension or conflict there if they've got a perfect world. So you actually want to throw challenges their way for them to get through, for something to be at stake in your novel.
Yeah, excellent. And totally self-serving answer, Francis. We help with that a lot at Author Accelerator and in my blueprint for a book program, to make sure that you've got a book that is going to hold your reader's attention with those things. So shameless plug for Author Accelerator. I think we've got to stop. We could go on forever. These are great questions. And Mae, you're so much fun to talk to. And it's so exciting to talk to you at the beginning of this, what feels like it's going to be a great thing. So thank you for sharing your time.
And thanks everybody for chatting, and I had fun. Thank you so much.
See, it was so fun. And good luck at Hedgebrook. I hope that goes really well for you. And we will all follow on Twitter to see. I'm sure you'll announce on Twitter when your website goes live and people can start to get word from when the book comes out and things that'll be happening around it. So that'll be fun.
Oh, definitely.
All right. So thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. And Mae, thank you again. Everyone is saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And
Thank you.
so I'll talk to you soon, Mae.
Okay, sounds good. Bye. Thanks.